StewartHaas Racing is expected to leave Ford at the end of the 2024 season and could be headed to Chevrolet in 2025. Andretti Global could be headed to NASCAR in the coming years. NASCAR has had conversations also with Dodger Stadium about hosting a race. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're first going to talk about the Truck Series race at Pocono. As the length of the race and the title sponsor have been revealed, it's going to be called the CRC Breakline 175. That means this race is going to be expanded from, I think, 160 miles up to 175 miles, and it's going to be a 70-lap race instead of, I think, originally a 160-lap event or a 60 or 65-lap event. They're expanding it to make the race a little bit longer. This race will also take place on Friday. CRC Breakline, I think, has sponsored the Truck Series race at this track in the past. Solid numbers. It's going to be a 70-lap event on Friday night. We'll see if the issues with darkness come into play for the Truck Series race at Pocono. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Andy's Frozen Custard. As it was reported by Adam Stern, I believe on Saturday or Friday, the Andy's Frozen Custard is offering a new seasonal menu item around cold custard. Going to be called the Frozen Custard Concrete. That is going to be coming, I believe, on April 13th or April 14th of this year. That'll be out this spring and also throughout the summer as well. The Frozen Custard Concrete will be $6.99. This is, of course, with the partnership that StewartHaas Racing announced at Andy's Frozen Custard, which, of course, is going to sponsor cold custard for a couple races this year. I think it's a really amazing and fantastic partnership overall for them, and I think it's cool that Andy's Frozen Custard is going to be doing this new concrete for cold custard. I thought there'd be a chance they find a way to do something cool about this. Overall, I think this is pretty awesome and great to see that Andy's Frozen Custard is doing a new seasonal branding. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Toyota. Now on Saturday, Denny Hamlin picked up the pole for the Cup Series race at Phoenix. This is now the 150th pole for Toyota in Cup, which Jeff Gluck brought this up on Twitter. What's really interesting about this is going back to 2007 when Toyota was struggling to make races and struggled in qualifying. Now they're winning poles and they got their first pole of the year, but for them to win their 150th pole, that's a pretty incredible accomplishment for Toyota. And I think that number is only going to get bigger. Wouldn't surprise or shock if Toyota, especially with how much speed they showed in today's race, how fast they're going to be at getting poles. I think it's a really amazing accomplishment. Congratulations, Toyota, on getting their 150th pole in the Cup Series. I think it's a phenomenal accomplishment for them. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Phoenix Raceway. Right before the NASCAR Cup Series race kicked off earlier today, it was officially confirmed by the racetrack for the sixth straight event at the track, the Cup race sold out once again. Say what you want to say about the racing at Phoenix Raceway. The fact that it's had 6 straight sellouts from 2022 up to this race in 2024, I think that is an amazing accomplishment for Phoenix Raceway. Like I said, I don't think the racing at Phoenix has generally been that great in recent years and seasons because of the reconfiguration, everything they've done with the track. But I think the fact that they sold out once again, I think it's an amazing and incredible accomplishment. So congratulations to them on being able to accomplish that and being able to do that. Pretty awesome stuff overall, in my opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Right before we had the Xfinity Series race took place, you also had the Formula 1 race in Jeddah, the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. And Max Verstappen, once again, for the second week in a row, picked up the victory, his second straight win of the season. I think his 9th consecutive win in a row, which I think is now the second time that has happened for Max Verstappen. Now, Max Verstappen obviously has had a fantastic start to the year. There was a little drama that happened in the race. He did have a safety car for, I think it was, for Lance Stroll, if I'm not mistaken, who ran into the outside wall, got a ton of damage. And then there was a little bit of drama where we had drivers like Ollie Behrman, who made his debut, which, by the way, Ollie Behrman in his debut finished in 7th place, which is extremely impressive in your debut for the 18-year-old driver. This could lead him getting an F1 ride in the not-so-distant future. Obviously, won't be with Ferrari because Lewis Hamilton is going to be in that seat. It is cool to see Max Verstappen win again. It was a closer race, even though it ended up being 12 seconds because of the fact that Sergio Perez did basically get a 5-second penalty for avoidable contact on pit road, if I'm not mistaken, or basically unsafe release what the penalty he received. Nonetheless, so congratulations to Max Verstappen on picking up the win and picking up the victory in the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Isabelle Robusto. Now, during the ARCA Series race, Isabelle Robusto, she made her ARCA debut, and she ended up finishing 6th in her ARCA debut, driving for Venturini Motorsports. Isabelle Robusto, in my opinion, had an extremely impressive and a fantastic debut. Considering the fact that she has not been an ARCA car before, she was at points in 3rd position and was running down William Swalch in 2nd. Gio Ruggiero had the best car for most of the first half of the event, but she was at times even quicker than the leaders, and like I said, was running William Swalch down before the midway break came. It seemed like her car kind of faded in the second half of the race, but for her to finish in 6th place in her debut, that is extremely impressive. And I expect that she's only going to get better with more experience that she has. There's a lot of hype around her, and there's a lot of praise around her, and to see her finish in 6th is really cool. I hope, because she was supposed to make her ARCA debut last year. Obviously, there was unfortunate circumstances that took place to cost her a shot at running the whole season this last year. But still, for Isabelle Robusto to finish 6th, I think it's a really impressive accomplishment. Congratulations to her on finishing 6th in her ARCA debut. I expect things to only continue to improve and get better for her as these seasons progress. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Joe Gibbs Racing. There's many reports that have been coming out recently, including from Joe Gibbs Racing, that they have changed their logo as of now just for the NASCAR Xfinity Series. And they're expecting to have the new Joe Gibbs Racing logo for the Cup Series at some point as well. Now, why is Joe Gibbs Racing changing the logo? It is be a tribute to Coy Gibbs, who sadly passed away 2 years ago, right before the NASCAR Cup Series Championship race at Phoenix in 2022. This is also a tribute, I think, of course, to their 2002 motocross team from back in the day when Joe Gibbs Racing was in the motocross team, which they had a lot of success back in the day. And I think it's a really awesome and exciting and pretty good looking logo. I like what they've done with it. It's a really nice tribute to Coy Gibbs, and we'll see drivers throughout the season that are with the Joe Gibbs Racing pipeline. I see that when more Xfinity starts for other drivers. There could be opportunities like for Bubba Wallace and other drivers like Eric Ombrose also to continue making starts for the team. But I think the logo does look really solid and cool, and glad to see that Joe Gibbs Racing is changing the logo. I like the new logo that they have, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Preston Partis. As it was announced on Friday afternoon that Preston Partis is going to be driving a 50 car for Partis Racing next weekend at Circuit of the Americas. According to what Preston has told the media, he is planning to run up to about as many races as he did last year in the Xfinity Series, which the Partis Racing organization made 4 starts in 2023. So they're probably going to make around 4 to 5 starts in 2024. Preston Partis has been really strong in the Trans Am Series and also has been in the Mazda MX-5 Cup Series and has won some races in that series as well. They are expected to have ECR engines for the event, which I think is really going to help them in 2024 making races. Obviously, they're going to have to qualify their way in on owner's points, but I think it's really cool and awesome to see that Preston Partis is back in the Xfinity Series this year. His dad, of course, was a legend of doing some of the races. He also, of course, ran Xfinity quite a bit as well. His father, Dan, is really helping out in a big way to get Preston on the racetrack. I'm wishing Preston the best of luck, and glad to see, though, that he is going to be racing with Partis Racing at Circuit of the Americas. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the St. Petersburg Grand Prix. Now, right before the NASCAR Cup Series race took place at Phoenix International Raceway, you had the IndyCar season opener at St. Petersburg. This race, for the most part, was a field strategy race. It wasn't as much passing as there probably could have been, but the field strategy was definitely very interesting and cool. There was a crash early in lap 26 of Marcus Armstrong, who backed it into the outside wall. You also had other drivers like Linus Lundqvist who got turned by Roman Grosjean. But the driver who dominated this race was Joseph Newgarden. Joseph Newgarden would lead 92 of 100 laps and pick up his first win of the 2024 season. And this is a guy who last year struggled on street courses and a team that really wasn't good because 3 of the top 4 finishing positions were Team Pensky cars. This team also that really did not make a lot of changes this offseason, except basically adding an alliance of AJ Foyt this year. Congratulations, Joseph Newgarden, on picking up the win and the victory. It's a massive and incredible accomplishment for the organization. I expect things to only get better for this team as the year goes on. I think at this point you have to put Joseph Newgarden maybe as a favorite to win the championship of how strong of a start this team has had. It's a really great accomplishment for them. Congratulations once again to Joseph Newgarden on picking up the win and the victory in the St. Petersburg Grand Prix. A massive and a great win for the team and the organization. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Michael Andretti. Now, there was an article that came out, I think, out from the Associated Press that Michael Andretti is not very happy with the direction that Roger Penske is running IndyCar. And he called for Roger Penske to sell the IndyCar brand in the IndyCar series. Basically, he's one among many owners that have been really frustrated with the direction IndyCar is going. He basically said that there's a diamond in the rough when it comes to IndyCar, and he believes that if someone came in, like Liberty Media came in to try to build up the series and the brand, then there could be potential for IndyCar to grow. But he feels like, what many others feel, is that they're not making the series better, that being the Team Penske group. Well, there was a report that then came out on Sunday morning that Penske officials were not very happy with Andretti, and they were furious with him because of what he said. You know what? They can be furious all they want to. They can be mad all they want to. That's perfectly fine and understandable. But you know what would make things better? If he actually did something about it. IndyCar, in my opinion, has so much potential to grow as a series, but we're not going to be getting a new chassis till 2027. We haven't really added any new racetracks, and the tracks that you have added were former racetracks on the schedule, like Milwaukee, though I will say Milwaukee is a great racetrack, and the Thermal Club, which a lot of people did not want, though I do think the event could be a really strong and good event. Nobody really wanted this, and that's why Michael Andretti is fed up and frustrated with what they're doing, because they could do a much better job, and everybody knows that they can do a much better job, but they're not doing that good job, and that's why a lot of people in the industry of IndyCar are pissed and frustrated. They need to make changes to make the series better, and right now it seems like they're not making those changes to make the racing product better than it could end up being. I think for a lot of fans, it's really frustrating, and it sucks for the series because I do believe that IndyCar could be in a better position if Team Penske was not running it. I do agree with Michael Andretti 100%. He wanted to buy the series a few years ago, but they would not budge on that. And to be honest, it is very, very frustrating as a fan of IndyCar who knows, like Michael Andretti, who knows this series can get a lot better. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Bobby Labonte. As it was announced on Friday late evening after the Cup Series practice concluded at Phoenix that Bobby Labonte will be returning to Joe Gibbs Racing as a brand ambassador. He'll be working with Joe Gibbs Racing on their social media presence, among other things as well. Bobby Labonte has not been involved with Joe Gibbs Racing since the 2005 season when he left the team at the end of 2005 and then went to Petty Enterprises in 2006 before his career sadly fizzled out. To see that Bobby Labonte is going back over to Joe Gibbs Racing, I think is going to be really good for the team. One, being a brand ambassador for the organization, which he's one of the big reasons why JGR became as strong as an organization as they were. He was the first driver at that team to win a championship for their Cup Series organization and won a lot of races, and of course won the Brickyard 400, never won the Daytona 500, but won a lot of big races at Atlanta Motor Speedway and was extremely successful in his NASCAR Cup Series career, especially when he drove for JGR. And I think he's also going to be a coach as well to some of the younger drivers, especially in the Xfinity program, and help out drivers like Chandler Smith and Sheldon Creed. He'll also be there to help and grow and develop JGR and make them bigger and stronger. We've been seeing a lot of drivers who are legends and Hall of Famers coming out of retirement to work. We've seen Matt Kenseth working as an advisor for the organization of Legacy Motor Club. Same with Trevor Bayne. You've got Corey Heim joining up with Legacy as well. In general, I love to see that we're bringing people out of retirement to try to build up these brands once again. Joe Gibbs Racing's been making some big moves over this offseason to try to grow their branding, though they have been very successful in the past. I think it's pretty awesome and a great accomplishment to see that Bobby Labonte is coming back and he'll be working with Joe Gibbs Racing. I think he's got a really good opportunity chance to really help grow the Joe Gibbs Racing brand going into the not-so-distant future. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Brendan Queen. As it was confirmed on Friday morning that Brendan Queen will be making his Truck Series debut at North Wilkesboro, driving a 1 for Trion Garage. Now, Trion Garage had been teasing some potential driver that a lot of people are going to like that was going to be getting behind the wheel. People have suggested, like myself, maybe Kurt Busch. I talked about this on this channel a couple days ago that we all thought that Kurt Busch might be returning to NASCAR. He's been kind of teasing it. Some had even said Carl Edwards, but it didn't really look like Carl Edwards in the still photo. Some thought maybe it was Bubba Wallace. Bubba Wallace is someone who could make some starts. We know that Bubba had talked to Todd Gillen on the spaces that NASCAR did before the Daytona 500. He's interested in making some more truck starts this year. John Henry Nemechek's name had been mentioned, but Brendan Queen was inevitably the driver, and also Matt Benedell been mentioned as well, but Brendan Queen was the inevitable driver that they choose. Now, for those who do not know who Brendan Queen is a legend of the late model scene and up-and-coming talent as well. He currently competes in the Cars Late Model Tour and was a massive standout in the Cars Late Model Tour in 2023. And another cool fact as well, Brendan Queen actually won the late model race at North Wilkesboro last year that Dale Jr. competed in. So we have been seeing a lot late model drivers getting opportunities and chances. Remember, about a week or two ago, it was announced that Bubba Pollard, he's also making his debut in the Xfinity Series, driving the 88 car for Junior Motorsports. I think this is a massive and a huge opportunity for Brendan Queen, and I do believe that Brendan Queen could be someone to watch, or especially with experience at this racetrack. And the one truck was pretty fast last year at this track. Bubba Wallace was really quick, one of the few cars that could hang with Kyle Larson in the event. And we've been seeing a lot of all-star drivers get chances and opportunities. I'm really excited for Brendan Queen, and I'm glad to see that he'll get the chance and opportunity to drive for Tricon Garage. I think he will 100% make the best of it. I'm excited to see him get the chance and opportunity to drive for this team in 2024 at North Wilkesboro. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Aric Almirola. As Aric Almirola confirmed after the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Phoenix that he'll be back with Joe Gibbs Racing once again at Richmond International Raceway, confirming that he will not be racing at Circuit of the Americas. Now, he did not confirm what number he is going to be in, though, in this event. We do know right now that John Henry Nemechek is not going to be in the 20 at Richmond. We know he's going to be at Circuit Americas technically next weekend in the 20 car, but we know that it won't be Aric Almirola in that 20C at Richmond. So I'd have to imagine that he's probably going to be in the 20 car at Richmond. He also could technically be in the number 19 car at Richmond as well, but it's not entirely sure at this point which number he's going to be in. But if I had my guess right now, he's going to be in the 20 more than likely, considering the ride is meant to be split between John Henry Nemechek and Aric Almirola. And this also is going to be the third start that Aric Almirola has had in his return to the Xfinity Series, because he's going to make 15 Xfinity Series starts throughout this year and this season. We also know that Ty Gibbs is going to be in that 19 car next week at Circuit Americas as well, because he'll be doing a double and running both of the Cup and the Xfinity Series events as well. I'm excited to see Aric Almirola back in the Xfinity Series once again. He's been doing pretty solid so far. Had a pretty good car at Phoenix for, unfortunately, getting collected in the big wreck that was caused by his teammates Chandler Smith and John Hunter Nemechek, and Almirola had nowhere to go and got a ton of damage and finished 31st out of the race, which was really unfortunate because I think Aric Almirola could have contended for the win at the end of the day. So, though, glad to see that Aric Almirola's back, and I think he's been a good advisor. He's a really good coach for the team. There are rumors he was going to make a start in the third 2311 racing car at some point this year, though I don't think that's going to happen. Even Carl Evers was mentioned as well for that, but I don't think that's going to happen at this point. So, though, excited to see that Aric Almirola is back with Joe Gibbs Racing in Richmond. I think he will for sure make the most out of it, and we'll see if he wins, because I think he absolutely is going to be a major threat and a pretty serious and big contender to get it done at Richmond International Raceway 2 weeks from now. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Shane Van Gisbergen. Now, I did a video talking about his performance at Phoenix International Raceway yesterday in a special video. But Shane Van Gisbergen had a very solid performance at Phoenix International Raceway yesterday and crossed the line and finished 6th, scoring his second career Xfinity Series top 10 finish. Shane Van Gisbergen kind of struggled a little earlier in the day, but as the day progressed, he did survive the big wreck and was getting better and better as the run progressed and was able to cross the line in 6th place. I'm telling you, Shane Van Gisbergen is going to learn very, very quickly, and I expect him to only get better and better as the year progresses and as the season continues on. This also leads to conversations about Shane Van Gisbergen's future, whether or not if eventually will be a full-time NASCAR Cup Series driver, because let's just say this, there's a lot of talk right now. We know that Trackhouse and Justin Marks stated this in an NBC, NASCAR.com article, I think with Zach Steranell, if I'm not mistaken, or Nate Ryan, basically stating that he wants to eventually have 4 full-time cars. And Shane Van Gisbergen is probably part of those plans. And it's no secret that SVG wants to eventually be a full-time Cup Series driver next year with Trackhouse. But the way that he's going to get the opportunity to do that is by how he performs in these Xfinity Series races. He does need to qualify a little better. That's where he's been struggling a little bit. But if he continues to improve on his qualifying performances, I think it's only a matter of time. It's not a matter of if, but a matter of when he's going to be a driver in the Cup Series. And he's also had another Cup Series race as well to his schedule. I expect Chevy and Gisbergen in the not-so-distant future to be a full-time Cup Series driver, and for him to finish in 6th place today or yesterday, I should say, or Saturday when you're watching this, I think it's a really, really impressive day for Shane. I expect it to only get better, and I think he's going to get stronger and stronger and stronger as a driver in Xfinity, and I do believe in the not-so-distant future, he is going to win a race and score victories in Xfinity. He might be a favorite to win COTA. He's probably my pick when we get to Circuit of the Americas. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Erik Jones versus Chase Briscoe. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Cup Series race on Sunday, which probably most of you watching this video probably have seen it, you saw the incident between Erik Jones and Chase Briscoe. On one of the late race restarts around 95 laps to go on the last restart, they were 4 wide going into the corner. You had Bubba Wallace in the middle, Erik Jones up on the top, and you had Chase Briscoe on the bottom. I think maybe Daniel Suarez or Kyle Larson in that same group as well. Well, Chase Briscoe kind of sent it in the corner a little bit, and unfortunately Briscoe had a little bit of contact, forcing Bubba Wallace up and Erik Jones. Then Erik Jones hit the outside wall, and unfortunately has a broken toe link and goes many laps down and finishes outside the top 30 after having a car that could have gotten a top 10 or maybe even a top 15. After the race, Erik Jones interviewed by people from Front Stretch, including Kevin Nix from Lost Crashes, and basically he says that he was not very happy with Chase Briscoe and says that if he tried to call them, he would go ahead and answer that call. Chase Briscoe also responded to this situation as well, and he basically said, I've never really talked to Erik Jones before, but he said if Erik Jones was to call him, he definitely would answer the phone. Look, he also did kind of reiterate that they've ran around each other a lot more, and he also notes that he's been a lot more aggressive on the racetrack because he wants to be up front a lot more, especially where he wasn't as aggressive last year. He kind of struggled on the racetrack. Look, when I think of Erik Jones and Chase Briscoe especially, they're two drivers who've been very successful in the lower series. Erik Jones won a championship in trucks years ago, but Erik Jones also had a car today that was capable of getting a top 10 finish. Chase Briscoe also had a very, very good run. These are two drivers that could one day be fighting each other for the win on a consistent basis if StewartHaas Racing gets their stuff together, which seems like they're a little better of an organization right now at the moment. But these two, it does prize or shock that these two may have a little bit of beef. Now, obviously, do I think they're going to resolve this? I think there's a really great chance and a really strong possibility that both Erik Jones and Chase Briscoe are going to resolve the situation and issue. I don't think this is going to linger on too long because Erik Jones is not a driver normally who gets mad and upset. He's kind of like Matt Kenseth in essence, which is kind of cool considering Matt Kenseth is working a Legacy Motor Club. He's a driver that does not tend to get very mad and frustrated about situations. So while right now I think Erik Jones might be a little fed up that he got screwed out of a good finish, I think he is going to learn to keep his temper in check a little bit, and I don't think he is going to lose his mind about the situation and incident. So as much as I think he's a little bit frustrated and upset about a situation with Chase Briscoe, I don't think it's going to linger on too much. In my honest opinion, I could be wrong, it lingers on a little bit, but I don't think there's going to be any trouble between these drivers going forward in the future, and I think they will be able to resolve it in the coming weeks, especially if both start performing really, really well. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the short track package. Now, there's been a lot of talks and conversations this weekend surrounding the short track package because on Friday was basically the first true test of the short track package on track. And many drivers were not very happy after the first day. Mark Truex Jr. said that you could not pass and Dirty Air was worse than previously. William Byron echoed the same statements. He said Dirty Air was a major threat and issue. Same with Tyler Reddick. He said Dirty Air was worse. Chase Elliott said you can do whatever tire combination you want to and you can do whatever you want about it, but it's not going to make the stuff better. Daniel Suarez also said that the dirty air was a major problem issue during the practice session as well. And then yesterday, while I'm not exactly sure if this is accurate, same as Denny Hamlin said, Denny Hamlin says that they could switch to 750 horsepower in a switch with no problem, though that Jeff Gluck did reiterate on the teardown tonight that Denny Hamlin might have just been echoing statements from the media as well. Now, the race did happen today, and I will say that dirty air is still a major problem and issue, but I will come out and say this. I do think it is a little bit better than what we saw last year, but I'm not going to get my full judgment yet on the short track package at this point because we haven't gone to a track like Richmond, which we're going to be going into 2 weeks from now because we're not going to be going to Bristol. There are also, Martinsville's another track to kind of pay attention to that as well to see how much better it is. I don't think Phoenix is the best track test. And even Brad Keselowski said that yesterday speaking to Bob Pockers, and Bob had the clip earlier this morning before the race happened. He said, Phoenix is not the best track to test out. I just personally don't think Phoenix is that great of a racetrack, and I feel like Phoenix should not be the racetrack that we should go to. But getting back to the comments that Denny Hamlin made about the horsepower, I agree 1,000%. We need to increase the horsepower on these next-gen cars on the short tracks and the road courses. I think that is going to make the racing at least a little bit better. It may not make a massive difference, but instead of complaining about saying it may not make a difference, why not just go ahead and try it out and test it? Because NASCAR was supposed to try out shifting as well and getting rid of that. For whatever reason, they did not do that. They just tested more aero components. We have tried so many aero components on this next-gen car. And the drivers have said it, that they want more horsepower in these cars. And 3 of the 4 big engine builders, David Wilson from TRD, the guy Bob Fisher from RCR and ECR engines, and then of course Doug Yates said that they can go up to 750 to 800 horsepower and it's not going to make a massive and a huge difference on the engine training and all that stuff. The reason they have lower horsepower is they try to save a little bit on the engines. But you've had engine builders who said that if you increase the horsepower, it's not going to hurt the engines in a big way. You can still probably run them very, very long. Of course, NASCAR wants to continue to save money. For some reason, NASCAR will not give the green light to this. Why not just test it? And if it doesn't improve it, if you do increase horsepower in these cars, and it doesn't show any sign of improvement, then fair, we'll all shut up and stop complaining about not having horsepower. But until you do it, we're still going to complain about it. Again, I thought today's racing product, or yesterday when you're watching this, I thought the racing product was solid. I'll give them that. The racing was not that awful. It wasn't great by any stretch of imagination because this car still needs a lot of work, but I'm not going to give my full thoughts on this until we get later down the road in Martinsville and Richmond, which we are going to have to talk about that if the racing is worse. I thought the racing today was okay for sure, but it wasn't great. Dirty air is still a major issue. Tires seem to not be a massive thing later in the race, especially when we got later in the day, especially when it cooled off a little bit. I believe that it definitely needs to improve a little bit. I hope NASCAR does try a little more horsepower. I think if they added a little more horsepower, I think the racing would definitely be at least slightly and a little bit better. I hope they go ahead and do it because I think the sport would be in a better position if they just listen to the drivers, because the drivers like Christopher Bell in the past, Chase Elliott, I think Larson has said it, Denny Hamlin has said it, add horsepower to the car. We want to see more horsepower on these next-gen cars. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of 3 major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Dodger Stadium. Now, earlier this week, I think on Friday, I talked about the fact that NASCAR has had talks and conversations about potentially going to Dodger Stadium. It doesn't sound like as of right now it might be 2025 yet, but they've had talks, conversations with the Los Angeles Dodgers about hosting a NASCAR Cup Series race there. Well, Dustin Law for NBC wrote an article where he actually sat down with Steve Phelps, and he says that confirms that there have been talks and conversations about surrounding Dodger Stadium and hosting a NASCAR Cup Series race and a date there. Now, according to also what Steve Phelps said, there still could be returning to the Los Angeles Coliseum in 2025, but from what people have said on YouTube and social media, among other things, it sounds like they might be trying to get away from being in that area and moving on to a different part of the world for the Clash. There's been a lot of talk of the Clash could move over to Mexico City or Guadalajara, and even Canada has it mentioned as a massive and a huge possibility. We'll get to talk about the LA Coliseum here in just a second. It's no secret that NASCAR wants to stay in the Southern California area in the Los Angeles market. Why? Well, the LA market is one of the biggest markets in the United States. And if you leave that market, even though it's not as big for certain numbers like Greenville, South Carolina, on other things like North Carolina and stuff, it's still, even though it's a smaller number, there are still more people watching in that area. NASCAR knows that Los Angeles in that market is a massive major and a pretty big market. That's why they stay in the LA area. I would definitely be for them doing this in 2026 because, like I mentioned and said, it doesn't sound like it's going to be a thing done for 2025. My best guess is the early they would do this is 2026 because I think that they are going to either try to, one, stay in the LA Coliseum or they're going to try to have it in Mexico next year, which personally I think going to Mexico would definitely be really, really cool because NASCAR wants to go international. They've also, like I mentioned, they want to go to Canada as well, but Mexico is definitely a pretty big possibility. So Dodger Stadium is definitely something to watch for. And also Formula E's been mentioned as well, which I know a lot of people have their opinions on Formula E. Now, obviously, what could the dimensions of the track be? It could be like a triangle. I've seen some people bring up McCormick Speedway from when NASCAR strictly stock raced there back in the 1950s at McCormick Speedway. So that certainly could be an option for sure as well on that front in that aspect. Look, though, I also would love to see at the same time them try something a little different. Why not go to Long Beach? Long Beach is a street circuit that NASCAR absolutely probably would have a lot of fun. NASCAR loves street circuit racing, and it's not even clear at this point if NASCAR is going to have the race at Chicago Street Course in 2025. There were rumors last year circulating that Chicagoland might come back in 2025. And if Chicagoland comes back, Chicago Street Course isn't back, you're going to have a street course race ready. So that's certainly something to keep your eyes out on. That's why I bring up Long Beach, because I think the racing would be good at Long Beach next year. And then you think about the LA Coliseum. I mentioned this. There's talk right now that they could return to the LA Coliseum. But like I mentioned a few minutes ago, there's also a lot of people saying in the industry that they're ready to move on from being in the LA Coliseum and they want to move on to a different part of the world in a different part of the country with that event. Because I think that the LA Coliseum has run its course. And I also understand the sentiment from people saying, why not just bring it to a track like Irwindale Speedway, which has put on solid racing and that track has survived. Or even, I've seen people mention Kevin Harvick's Kern County Raceway, which Kevin Harvick just bought ownership early in this year. I could definitely see that as also a pretty big possibility as well as something that NASCAR could inevitably end up doing. But to me, NASCAR wants to go for the big moments. But again, I also think that going to Dodger Stadium, yes, it would be historic. And like I said, I would love to see him go to Dodger Stadium and race inside there. But you would have to have a set amount of time, and they probably would have to have it as the Clash once again. They probably couldn't have it late in the year, and they could do it maybe early in West Coast Swing, but that would probably be it. But NASCAR, like I said, it's no secret. They want to race in the Southern California area and stay in that market, but they also want to expand internationally, which also could affect them in other areas as well on the schedule that we'll probably talk about in the coming weeks as well. Nonetheless, it's going to be interesting to see what NASCAR does in fact decide to do when it comes to Southern California, and if they are going to race at Dodger Stadium. I personally would think it'd be kind of cool to see him race at Dodger Stadium. I know some fans might not agree with me on that, but it's my opinion that Dodger Stadium could absolutely be a shout and a possibility of something that could end up happening. Is something to definitely watch out for sure when it comes to NASCAR scheduling going forward down the road. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next major story in today's episode as we're talking about Michael Andretti. Now, there's been a lot of talk and conversations about Andretti Global trying to get into Formula One. But over the course of the last couple months, there's also been a lot of talk and conversation about Andretti Global potentially joining NASCAR as well. And over this week, while Michael Andretti was speaking about his frustrations at Roger Pensky, he also spoke about his interest in joining NASCAR. He says he's still interested in joining NASCAR, but it would more than likely just be with a partnership with an organization like he did with the Acura program and working with Wayne Taylor Racing, instead of just going in and bringing his own organization in to the series. Like I said, it is no secret that Michael Andretti has been interested over the last year or so, because he did say his biggest priority currently at the moment is still trying to get into Formula One. And he has been working really hard, and they are still on schedule. They've been doing crash testing, among other things, to try to still get into Formula One. But at this point, when I think of Michael Andretti, I don't think he is going to get into Formula One. I think any chance of him getting to Formula One, unless those antitrust laws in Europe come into play and lawsuits come into play, I don't think there's any chance that he is going to get into Formula One. The teams, just for whatever reason, do not want him to join Formula One. Even though he's bringing in a manufacturer, by the way, they don't want to bring him in because they said he's not going to be a competitive, even though like every other organization is a competitive. And Alpine right now is just not very, very good. Also, looking at NASCAR, though, they have a way of getting in. Now, how could Michael Andretti buy his way, and what teams could he partner up with? Well, there are some organizations he could partner up with. Maybe StewartHaas Racing, wanted to buy part of SHR. That certainly is an option and possibility. StewartHaas Racing, we're going to talk about them at the end of this episode. He could buy out Gene Hostek in the organization, maybe called Stewart Andretti Racing. That certainly could be an option, but he's also got to buy 2 charters. But the big key thing in a team that I think is most likely going to be the organization is Spire. And a big reason why I mentioned Spire Motorsports is because there actually is a little bit of a connection between Spire and Andretti. Spire has a big partnership with Gamebridge in Group 1001. Dan Townis is a co-owner of Gamebridge in Group 1001. The other key thing is Dan Townis is also a co-owner of Andretti Autosport / Andretti Global. So he has an ownership stake in Andretti Global in a pretty big way. The other thing that really could happen if Michael Andretti was to join NASCAR is he could bring a new manufacturer in. It is no shout in secret right now that Honda is getting very close, and there's a lot of talk right now that Honda is going to find their way into NASCAR in the coming years, in coming seasons. They're not expecting it to come in the 2025 season. A lot of speculating the earliest that Honda may join the sport is 2026. Why do I mention this? Well, think about this for instance. Michael Andretti has had a big affiliation with Honda and Acura for a long time, since all the way back in 2014. Even before that, when they left for Chevy for a couple years, but they eventually went back to Honda starting, I believe, in the 2014 or 2015 season. And they have stayed with Honda for the last couple of years. Last decade, they've won races and they've kind of contended for championships, and they've won a lot of races in IndyCar. And Michael Andretti's had a lot of success. And like I said, when you mentioned Gamebridge, Mario Andretti's been invested with Rev Racing with that Gamebridge sponsorship. He's been involved a little bit, helping Nick Sanchez out. We know that Andretti's interested in going into NASCAR. And I think Andretti Global coming to NASCAR, the name Andretti, would be huge, considering Michael Andretti's father, Mario, won the Daytona 500 in 1967 and only is one of his 11 races he ran in Cup, which was very impressive, by the way, nearly 60 years ago at this point. But having the name Michael Andretti in the sport and potentially buying an ownership stake in Spire Motorsports would probably be the best and the biggest opportunity that they could absolutely have. Do I think it's going to happen? I think it is. The fact that this is not the first time we've heard Andretti Global interested in joining NASCAR, but this is now the 4th or 5th time in basically the last year would be huge. And it's not the first time they kind of almost came in. You go back 2013, they almost actually came into NASCAR with the Dodge program when Dodge was going to have a Gen 6 body. They were going to have Kurt Busch in the organization, and they were going to have Matt Kenseth as a potential driver as well. Obviously, that did not end up happening, but Kurt Busch did get to run the Indy 500, where he finished 6th, which, by the way, is still very impressive to this day. Kyle Larson will be able to match that this year in the Indy 500. So, though, I think there is a very strong chance and a really good possibility that this organization is going to show up in NASCAR, and they're going to buy Spire Motorsports. I wouldn't be surprised if Spire gets renamed to maybe Spire Andretti Motorsports. That certainly could be an option, because Spire is really looking to grow. They've had a solid start to the year. They're probably going to lose the charter probably over to Trackhouse, because Zane's probably going back to Trackhouse full-time in 2025. But still, I think Spire Motorsports looking to grow. Carson Osbar has had a fantastic and great season up to this point, and I believe that this team is only going to get better and stronger. And if Michael Andretti finds a way to buy into the organization, I think it's only going to make them better and stronger as well. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, I do believe that Andretti is going to find a way to get into NASCAR, and I think he's going to buy his way into the Spire Motorsports group, more than likely in the coming seasons. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we're talking about StewartHaas Racing once again. This is more of a catch-up / timeline on the StewartHaas Racing saga. So about a week ago, there was a report that came out from Jordan Bianchi from The Athletic that StewartHaas Racing, it sounds like they're more than likely going to be leaving Ford at the end of the 2024 season. There's been a lot of reports suggesting this, and then about a week ago, during the Las Vegas week, he basically kind of said that we all know that Honda's trying to come in, but SHR could switch over there, but that's not what's going on at the moment. But the indications are currently at the moment is that StewartHaas Racing is going to leave Ford at the end of the 2024 season. And I would imagine they're likely going to end up at another or manufacturer we'll get into here in just a second. Now, the note about SHR, this reason that we're talking about this, why they may end up leaving Ford at the end of this year, is because of the fact that this is the last year of the contract that StewartHaas Racing has with Ford. It goes to the 2024 season. Now, StewartHaas Racing has been with Ford since 2017. They haven't won a lot of. They won a lot of races at the beginning. Kevin Harvick got two wins in 2017. Those coming, I believe, at Texas and also coming at Sonoma Raceway. But they struggled outside of that for the most part. Outside of Kurt Busch winning the Daytona 500, 2018 was the best season for that organization. Clint Boyer got 2 wins. Eric Almirola and Kurt Busch got 1 win each, and Kevin Harvick won 8 races. Though a couple of those were encumbered victories. Then they started taking some sets backwards in 2019, where Kevin Harvick only won 3 races, but he did make the final 4. And then 2020 was a great year for Kevin Harvick, but since then, they've been falling off. And there's been a lot of frustration building between Tony Stewart and Ford. Tony Stewart wanted Kyle Larson really badly to drive for the organization in 2021, but inevitably Kyle Larson went over to Hendrick Motorsports and became teammates with Chase Elliott, Alex Bowman, and William Byron starting in 2021. And look at the success that we've seen Kyle Larson have at Hendrick. He's now tied for the 3rd most wins a Hendrick Motorsports driver has ever had. Then you think about Kyle Busch. There was a lot of talk back in 2022 that Kyle Busch could have been going to StewartHaas Racing in 2023. His name had been mentioned very carefully, but that did not end up happening. And Kyle Busch also was rumored to calling at one point, but that, of course, did not end up happening. Then you think about other drivers that could have gone. Zane Smith's name was mentioned. Harrison Burns' name was mentioned at one point. Michael McDowell's name was mentioned at one point. Even people brought up Haley Deegan as a possibility. Even Matty D, I think I mentioned as a possibility at one point. But obviously, that did not end up happening where any of those drivers came in. They got Josh Berry instead for the 4 car, which was a good move in my opinion. And it's no secret that SHR has had an okay start to the year so far. They've shown some speed and some pace. But they have been rumored to be leaving Ford. And again, they could be going to a different manufacturer. Now, what manufacturer could they be going to? Well, there's 2 other manufacturers currently in and 1 potential. First one is Chevrolet. StewartHaas Racing has worked with Chevy in the past. They worked with them from 2009 to 2016, and they won both of the championships they currently have. They won the championship in 2011 with Tony Stewart, when Tony Stewart went on that historic playoff run, winning half the playoff races. And then they won the championship in 2014 when Kevin Harvick won the championship in his first year at that organization. But at the end of the 2016 season, they left the organization, or Chevrolet, and they went to Ford. There's obviously rumors of Junior Motorsports wanting to go Cup Series racing. Some have been mentioned that maybe there's a way they could partner up with Junior Motorsports, and that's the way they basically get a partnership. But Junior has also stated publicly that he wants to basically bring his own team up. He wouldn't do it in a partnership role. That would not make any sense. But where would they be if they went to Chevrolets? I think they're likely going to end up at Chevy in 2025. Well, I could definitely see StewartHaas Racing working heavily with Hendrick Motorsports and even Trackhouse Racing to try to grow their brand. That certainly could be something that they could end up doing. Then there's also Toyota. There were rumors on a Facebook post that came out about a week ago that SHR apparently have been talking to Toyota, and they say their NHRA program that Tony Stewart has could also go to Toyota as well, since Toyota has a big work in the NHRA. Here's the problem with that, though. I don't think they're going to do that because you've got 3 big key partner organizations currently at Toyota. You've got 2311 Racing with Bubba Wallace and also Tyler Reddick and maybe even Kurt Busch this year at some point, and maybe Carl Edwards at some point, or Corey Hyman, Sheldon Creed. You've also got Joe Gibbs Racing with Denny Hamlin. Christopher Bell just won the most recent race at Phoenix. Ty Gibbs and Mark Truex Jr., though he could retire at the end of the year, talking about NTJ. And then you've got Legacy with Eric Jones and, of course, John Hunter Michek and Jimmy Johnson and Corey Heim this year and this season. I don't think they're going to want to do that. So I think Toyota might not be a possibility. And then you think about Honda. I've already talked about this, but Honda is heavily linked to be joining NASCAR. I think that is actually where they could go in 2026 if Honda joins. I would love to see them be the key team they go with. They could also, of course, Honda could go with a team like Trackhouse and other organizations like Spire as well and call it. That certainly could be an option for them as well. So Honda's a possibility, but we're not exactly sure yet. Now we talk about the other thing, and it's the charters. Could StewartHaas Racing sell their charters if they switch to Chevrolet? Because according to the agreement that SHR has with Ford right now, they have to field 4 cars with the current charter agreement they have. If they don't sign that extension with Ford, then they could probably lose that, and they could downsize to 3 charters, especially if them looking for money, because they lost Kevin Harvick, Eric Almirola, who brought in a ton of money in recent years and recent seasons. And they've also lost Kurt Busch as well, a big name who went over to 2311. And speaking of which, we know there's teams that are wanting charters. You've got 2311 Racing who wants to expand to 3 full-time cars. You have Colleague that could sell some charters, but they could expand. Same with Trackhouse. They want to expand to 4 full-time teams. They want Shane Van Gisbergen to be full-time at Cup next year. They want Daniel Suarez to be back in the series full-time, that being Trackhouse, because he's under contract year, but he could get back in there. In a nutshell, I think it's going to be very interesting to see what StewartHaas Racing does. But if you want my prediction currently at the moment, I think that StewartHaas Racing is going to leave Ford and they are going to go to Chevrolet. It just makes too much sense. I wouldn't be surprised or shocked that eventually they go to Honda in 2026, go to Chevy for a stopgap year, then switch to Honda in 2026. So, that is going to be today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support on Patreon as well. Links go below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. Where do you think StewartHaas Racing is going to? Do you think they're going to go to Chevy? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about all the stories we talk about today on the channel, including Dodger Stadium, and also the possibility of Andretti coming in? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I don't think there's any more videos dropping on the channel today. Tomorrow on the channel, we're going to have the entry list video for the Cup Series race at Bristol. We might also have the Truck Series one, but I'm not exactly sure yet. I might just release the Truck Series race picks on Tuesday. Then Wednesday, you're going to probably see another NASCAR news video dropping, maybe an SVG video as well. Then on Thursday, you're also going to see the Cup Series race picks along with the paint scheme preview. And Friday, there'll be another NASCAR news video dropping on the channel. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more good, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.